Hey
Hello,
everyone.
YouTube.
Hey. Welcome to yet another Modern Web Live 2020 stream. One small announcement before we start. There is a link to the feedback form in the video description, which we'd like you to fill in after the stream. And we'll be sending out our branded presents to 10 people we randomly pick from those who filled it in. So, we are here today with my colleagues PJ, Andre, and Craig to talk about progressive web apps, or PWAs, or PWAs, as Russian developers like to call them. PWAs are still relatively new, and like with any emerging technology, often clarity is needed. There's a lot to cover in the next hour, and we'll be taking some questions on the go, as well as answer some questions from the communities that we gathered before the stream at the end. But first, PJ and Craig, I'm sure a lot of our viewers already recognize you, but still, please take a short moment to introduce yourselves to the audience and say where you're dialing in from.
Thanks so much. I'm PJ. I'm a product manager on the Chrome Web Platform team, covering progressive web apps and permissions.
And hello, very happy to be here. My name is Craig. I am dialing in from Dublin. My job is I work in our go-to-market team as a product lead for progressive web apps, which isn't very descriptive. So what I actually do is I help companies adopt progressive web apps by working on sales strategy, developing materials, and running events. Something I worked on recently that you might have seen already was an ebook. It's called PWA, The Superpowers of the Web and Native Apps Combined. Both PJ and Danil also contributed to that. So check that out afterwards. And yeah, happy to be here.
Grand. Right, to set the scene, many of our viewers might have built a PW already, but are wondering where the business uplift is and really what makes a good PWA. I suggest we start off with the lighthouse audits because they show if your PW is ready, basically. So after you, PJ.
Sure. Yeah, I think this is a question I field a lot. What is it about a PWA that results in better business performance? And I think the answer is that there's no one part of a progressive web app that results in a better conversion rate or more site engagement or whatever the goals are for your property. It's really about all of the combined features and improved experience that you get when you implement when you're actually building a high quality overall experience that looks and feels like it belongs on the user's device. What you should keep in mind is that visitors' expectations are being set by the best experiences that they're having on their device. So on, say, a smartphone, some of the best experiences they have will probably have come in the past from native apps. So if you want to meet that that bar that users have in their mind, you really should be expecting to design something that is going to work on the device, very similar to a native application, and the same on desktop. Really, if a user has installed an app on their Windows computer, their Mac, they have expectations about how that software is going to work, and they don't really care whether or not that software was built with the web or something else. Their expectations are set by the best software that they've ever used on that device. So what makes a PWA result in business uplift? Largely, it's that progressive web app is intended to be a set of heuristics and both constraints and optimizations that result in an overall better quality app. Now, Lighthouse is there as a tool to help you meet this quality criteria and also just to provide some guardrails to stop you from doing things that will definitely harm the experience. I think every developer should be aware, though, if you're not already, that Lighthouse can't tell you that your application is actually good. It can tell you that you didn't make mistakes, but it can't. You could build a terrible app that meets 100% on Lighthouse criteria, and I think you could probably all understand that a fully automated tool will never be able to say that this is a great experience for a person. So something to keep in mind is Lighthouse is a tool. It's there to help you. There to help keep you from making mistakes in your development. But at the end of the day, what really matters is when users are interacting with your app, are they having a great experience? And if they're having a great experience, you're doing a good job.
Well, that's Craig. Anything you'd like to add to that?
No, PJ captured it very well. I think, I mean, maybe not to add, but just to re-emphasize it, I've heard of many companies who have just gone as far as getting the badge and then come back to us and said, "I've got this badge. Where's the money?" And it's it's a badge. If you get it, it's a good progress. Like PJ said, it's good to see that you're not causing harm. But you really need to figure out how to meet user expectations, and that will give you a business uplift, not a badge.
Right. Well, I think Andre, I mean, thanks for working the comments, man. I mean, you're doing a God's work there. But maybe you have something else you'd like to add to that.
No, I'm busy enough just with the comments, and keep those questions coming, everybody. We're happy to take them real time as well. We got a lot of questions in advance, so we'll try to make sure we save some time for those. And don't worry if we don't get to your question. We'll definitely try to make sure that we capture them and answer them afterwards, either in the description or we'll find a way to get to you. In particular, that's another opportunity to remind you to register, and we'll drop that link as well. So you'll get all the update emails and notifications of new sessions from us as well. But moving on, right? I guess we wanted to talk a little bit about what makes an app an app. Why do we even talk about applications? What is an application?
Mm-hmm. And especially about bringing app-like UX to the web. What is app-like UX in the end?
Yeah, I guess maybe I'll start with that one. So app-like user experience means implementing the gestures, the interactions that a user is going to expect from the device that they're on. So on mobile, that means making use of things like pinch zoom where it makes sense, making use of horizontal scrolling, ensuring that you've thought about the touch first interaction model, wherein things like touch targets have to be further apart than they would need to be if they're they're targets that are only being interacted with a mouse where there's more precision from the user. So these are all things that you need to think about when you're designing an experience that's designed for use on a smartphone as opposed to a desktop computer. Now, of course, the progressive part of a progressive web app means that you should progressively enhance the environment. So don't forget about the experience on larger screens. The awesome thing about PWAs is the reach that you have. You can build to one common runtime target, which is the web, and distribute across desktop and mobile devices. So do spend time thinking about what that interaction is going to be like on larger screens as well as smaller screens. And think about what other patterns, applications of your type have on the device that the user's using them on. So for example, on smartphone, users typically expect notifications, especially for certain types of apps. Food ordering and delivery, for example, users are going to expect to get notified when the delivery is in progress or if there's a problem with the delivery. So you should definitely be taking advantage of those patterns to increase the engagement rate of your app.
All right. And we're actually getting some questions, and it's like, show us best practices of PWAs. It's like, other actual best practices. I mean, can you even define what a PWA is?
I'll take a shot at it. I think this is a surprisingly common question, and I think usually where the confusion lies is that PWAs are just, in the context that they're used, assumed to be a technology, but PWAs are not a technology. PWAs are a pattern for building a modern web experience. And as a pattern, that means that they include a lot of other technologies. And I think just coming back to what I'd mentioned earlier about the fact that users' expectations are set by the best experiences they have on their device, those expectations are also a moving target. Those expectations will be different in 2021 than they are in 2020. And so something that, what that means for PWAs and the definition of PWAs is that you should also expect the definition of what makes a good PWA to change over time, because PWA should always be a pattern that's capturing best practices. So to give you an example, in the recent Lighthouse update, you might have noticed that adaptive icon support was added to one of the checks for an optimized PWA. And this is an evolution. The expectation of users has changed as to how icons should look and feel and how they should be masked on the various platforms that they can appear on. And so we've added this to the criteria check for what makes an exemplary PWA.
Right. Well, there is actually a question on notifications. There I'm saying it, any updates on iOS PWA notification, but I think we're going to cover that later on when we get to notifications. And the next thing that we really wanted to discuss is advanced PWA patterns. How do you use them? What does it look like from the US perspective? Install, offline, stuff like that.
Craig, do you want to go first this time?
Yeah, I can have a go. So we, in the ebook, pwa-book.awards.com, we went into a bit of depth on patterns for install, stealing a lot of PJ's content from his previous talks at Chrome Developer Summit and web.dev, and as well as some advanced offline patterns. And I think, for both of them, for install, what do advanced patterns look like? I think that they're always going to depend on your site and your users. I'd say an advanced pattern is, the fundamentals to start with are not to prompt people to install at a time that makes sense. And that means not using the default experience, which just pops up a mini bar at the bottom. Just because someone's been on the page for the first time and met a pretty low bar for a heuristic doesn't mean that's the right time to install. So I'd say that, like, fundamentals of advanced patterns are, don't use the default experience, customize it yourself. And then make sure to be valuable. Present the prompts at the right time with the value proposition. You can use the technology to never prompt people who already have your native app installed as well. PJ's better to talk about that, but we have an API that stops doing that. And then I think really, advanced patterns are looking at your user behavior from your analytics and testing different ways of prompting people and tracking that funnel to see how you can strike that balance between getting as many people as possible to install, but having quality installs, not just kind of people that did it because they were trying to get rid of your notification. And then on offline, offline is really something that should be taken, everything, but a real emphasis on what's the user benefit? What are you trying to achieve with offline? Because often offline's cool, you can have an offline experience and it's kind of fun from a developer point of view to build these, but businesses can struggle to understand the value of offline. They really struggle, like they're offline. Who cares? They can't do anything. So with offline best practices or patterns is really kind of starting from a design point of view, a user point of view, a how might we? We cover this pretty extensively in the book, but some of the kind of thought starters for how might we is, how might we make sure we never lose a customer because of their connectivity problems, right? Or that's just one prompt. There's a lot. You can pass a lighthouse audit with just a 200 response, not much value. An advanced pattern, you can go as far as have somebody purchase something offline, right? There's a lot of ground in between those two extremes. Not everyone will go fully offline, but everyone should go more than a 200 response. PJ, what do you think?
Yeah, I guess I would connect this to giving the user the experience they expect on their device, and an error like the web app failing when the device is offline, or any kind of like 404 or 5xx error, like we consider these to be errors on the web, but in a native world, these would be a crash. And you wouldn't want the app to crash because the user went offline. And so this is really fundamental, is the user doesn't probably know or care that their network connectivity isn't that great. They expect the app to continue to work and tell them something informative in the context of the application about why it's not working. And if you're not doing that, you're not going to meet the user's expectations. Now, let's say that it's an e-commerce site and the user can't actually complete a transaction while they're offline. So you might ask, well, okay, what's the point of supporting offline mode? I can't get a conversion in this case anyway. And the answer is usually that like these experiences are additive. The user, let's say that they're on transit, they've gone into a tunnel, they've lost connectivity to the site. Are they really going to complete that transaction when they come out of the tunnel on the other side if they end up on a Chrome Dino page, or are they just going to go? They're going to switch to another app and do something else, or if you do a better job and they can continue to navigate your site. So, for example, they can continue browsing at least items that they visited before, or if you've done a really good job and you've prefetched other things in your catalog, maybe they can continue to browse new items in the site. You've got a much higher chance that user is going to complete, and you'll see that in aggregate in your overall conversion rate over time.
Right. Can we maybe just go back to install experience for just one question? So the question we have is, but the default experience, the install prompt, means that this pattern, I'm just interpreting the question, so this probably means that this pattern was introduced because people are already used to it. So why not keep on using it?
PJ, you're the product manager for this.
Sure. Actually, so I'm not sure that I understood the question.
Right. Let me try to work this a bit more. So the question is, so the default is the default install pattern. It's there and people are already used to it. So why not keep on using it? What's the big deal?
This is based on where I said, get rid of the default experience. If people are used to it, why would we get rid of it?
Mm-hmm. Totally. Okay. So there's no plan right now to deprecate the in-browser install prompt for sites that are passing install criteria. We have added control to the developer so that some developers can choose to suppress those messages. So for example, let's say that you've implemented your own custom install logic on the page. You might not want to duplicate that with promotion of install from the browser. So in that case, we've added this ability to call prevent default on the before install prompt event so that you can prevent the browser from promoting install in browser UI. So let's talk a moment about why you would want to do this, why you would want to implement your own custom install UI. And the answer is really that this comes back to providing an experience that looks and feels like yours. So you want to promote install probably at key moments in the user's journey that are relevant to your type of application. So if we go back to this food ordering example, if you're just depending on the browser's promotion of the install prompt, it's going to prompt the user after a certain amount of user engagement on the site and when your site fulfills the install criteria. So probably within the first few seconds that user has first arrived on your page. To be honest, the user's not really likely to engage with that at that particular moment. And there's not a lot that we can do as the browser to do better because we don't have an understanding. The browser doesn't know that the user's just arrived on a food ordering site. We don't know the difference between a food ordering site and a newspaper in the browser. So, but it's going to be a much better moment to ask the user to install your application when they've just completed an order, or at some other key moment in the user journey when it's really obvious to the user what the value of installing is. They're like, okay, well, I just had a great experience, or my food just arrived. Then, I get this sort of order completed page and I just had a really good experience using your application. So this is a great moment to ask the user to install, much better than anything that the browser could do. So I think you just keep in mind that you're going to get a much better install rate if you customize it to the context of your users and your application.
Great. Do you guys, I think that's really comprehensive. But if you have anything to add to that.
I was just going to say that we have a question from Konstantin, in particular, PJ, because we've been mentioning a delivery website. The question is, how can I convert a food delivery website to a PWA? I think the answer is it's not that much different. And I think you've alluded to this already. The type of website probably isn't that important here.
Yeah, so we get this question a lot, like how do I convert an existing web property into a PWA? And the answer is it's probably easier than you think, and it can be done incrementally. A point of confusion that I encounter a lot is people thinking that progressive web app necessarily means also a single page app. A progressive web app does not have to be a single page app. And moving from a multi-page architecture to a single page architecture is usually a pretty big journey for a lot of properties. And I find this is like a major stumbling block for their adoption. So there might be reasons why you might want to make a multi-page app. There might be reasons you want to make a single page app, but that's independent of whether or not you are a PWA. So to be a PWA, you need a manifest. That manifest needs to have a name, an icon, a couple other manifest fields in there that you need to complete. All this criteria is described in the web.dev progressive web app section, so you can dive into the details there. You're also going to need a service worker, and you're going to need to have at least a minimal offline mode in order to fulfill the installability check. But these things can be bolted on to most existing sites. Now, you're going to get a Lighthouse score for these things, and you can even get quite good scores. I would really say that this is like the minimal work you should do. If your website doesn't really feel like an app, if it still feels like a website at the end of the day, and users are installing it, they're going to be like, okay, well, this is like a bit like an installed website and not kind of this app-like experience that we're advocating for. And that comes back to the fact that Lighthouse and even PWA criteria, these are just a set of heuristics to help you. They can't tell you that that you're at the end of the journey, that you've created the best possible user experience. So think about what's different about your experience from the best experiences that users are having on the devices that they're using, and identify the deltas and work to improve steadily. But the nice thing about this is it is something you can do incrementally. So you can make your existing website into a minimal PWA and then advance towards an optimized experience over time, one feature and one development at a time.
Grand. Huh. Well, thanks for such a comprehensive answer, guys. I think we should move to framework alternative for building an app like UX, because PWA is a pattern, but we have a lot of stuff we keep getting asked on this. It's like, where does Flutter stand in this? What do you do with React and React Native?
Mm-hmm. I think that all these frameworks that you can use to build cross-platform apps are great. One of the challenges with them is that these do typically imply that you're going to be starting a new project from scratch. So if you have an existing site and you want to move to React Native, that's probably going to be effectively a rewrite of your front end to move to React Native, and that's fine for some properties because after a few years it may be time for a front end refresh, but it may not be suitable for everyone to take that step. Something else that you might want to look at as well is just like, what is the cost going to be in terms of the upfront JavaScript payload to get your application up and running? It's not uncommon, unfortunately, to see sites these days, and unfortunately this tends to happen a lot in React because the core React library is fairly sizable, where it becomes quite difficult to optimize that to something that's going to hit a high Lighthouse performance score, just because the amount of JavaScript that needs to be downloaded first. Keep in mind that even if it's JavaScript's compressing down to a 300K bundle, that has to be unzipped, byte compiled on the device before the application even starts. Often before the application even starts rendering anything. So consider that in your choice of frameworks. One way to look at it is, what is sort of the front-loaded cost that the framework is adding to your experience up front, because that's always going to be a barrier to how much you can optimize your performance. Like if you've chosen a framework that needs 500 kilobytes of compressed JavaScript just to bootstrap, then that's always going to be a limit on how much you optimize. Like, even if you get your own code down to 10 kilobytes, well, you're still paying this fairly big cost by carrying the framework in there. So just give careful thought to what that overhead that you're adding to your experience with the framework, and choose accordingly.
Well, fair enough. Craig, any comments? Andre?
No, I think PJ was pretty comprehensive. This is not my area of expertise.
I would just add that as far as talk of frameworks goes, we might want to consider AMP as a framework here, and I'll drop a couple of links into the chat now, and maybe we'll add them to the distribution afterwards as well, to see if how people can connect that framework with the PWA concept. There's sometimes a bit of confusion around it. We don't have to go into detail now. We had a follow-up question from Stella Bear, who's been providing some stellar questions. He applauds one of the answers for being great, not sure which one. Are there any statistics or testing behind this? What proves that the custom experience, I guess this is referring back to the default experience and the custom one. What proves that the custom experience leads to a higher conversion rate?
So it would be very difficult to prove this in like the general case, because I can imagine that a site could do a terrible job of the custom experience and could certainly result in a lower conversion rate than the default browser UI. What I would say, and I would encourage everyone implementing PWAs to use analytics and to instrument extensively, and to instrument your install patterns to understand what those install rates are. So there's a number of different moments in the install journey where you could add instrumentation. So like, let's take, for example, imagine that you promote install in the top nav of your web application. So you could add a touch or click handler on the button itself to indicate that the user's tapped on that. Then at that point, the user's going to get a modal. There is a, you can capture the before install event. You can instrument what gets called when the user interacts with the page. That's going to call the prompt method on the before install prompt event. You also get an app installed event after the app is successfully installed. And if you add, analytics to all of these things, and there's a web.dev article on this as well, so you can get kind of step-by-step instructions and all the things to instrument here. You can really track how the install funnel works, and you can then decide for yourself. You can run some A/B tests and decide for yourself whether or not your custom install experience is outperforming the browser promoted UI, and sort of just answer this question for the context of your own app.
Okay, well, thanks for that. So, shall we move to notifications? What do you think?
Sure. Yeah.
Right. So notifications, views of notifications. Well, one of the questions that will be, say, very pressing in the developer communities very soon is newly arriving notification abuse mitigations. Because in Russia, as I already told you during our rehearsal about a week ago, that in Russia, push notifications are just everywhere, like literally everywhere, and this is probably going to affect a lot of developers. So maybe best practices, or what do you have in mind for this?
Sure. Yeah. Why don't we? Let me start by introducing web notifications in case there's anyone in the audience who's not familiar with them. Web notifications are very much like native notifications on Android. These notifications use channels to the Chrome browser. So let's say that you've developed a food delivery app. We'll just keep running with that example. So it's fooddelivery.com. The user's installed your app. They've enrolled in notifications. These notifications are actually being sent into the Chrome browser in a channel that's distinct to your app, and they will show up with your app's icon from the user's perspective when they see them in their Android notification tray. They're going to look and feel like a notification that came just from your application. There's no really obvious tells that this is a web notification that separates it from a native. On desktops, that's a little bit different. They tend to be, the notifications are usually drawn in the top right corner of the screen. And on desktop, the Chrome browser does need to be running in order for the notifications to be received. So if Chrome browser is not running, then the notification will get queued up and will appear when the next time the user starts the browser. So there's just some distinctions, whereas on Android, those notifications can arrive in the background because we have a background service running in Android that makes that possible. So those are just a couple of distinctions that might be important for everyone to understand. Then there's been a number of changes that have already landed this year for notifications. The first was the introduction of something that's called Quiet UI. And Quiet UI is there for users who generally don't accept web notifications, and to also just take some interventions on sites that are over prompting users for notifications. So let me talk about the UI itself for a second. The UI itself just has a reduced visual priority, and what that means is slightly different on each device. So that's why it's if it's slightly ambiguous, it's because it can vary by device. So for example, in the default notification prompt on Android is actually modal. So the user needs to make a decision in the default UI. They either need to block or accept the notification permission request. In Quiet UI, that's not the case. The user can continue to browse and interact with the site even while the notification prompt is there. So these are just like this kind of the small distinctions. And then there's a few different ways that users can get enrolled in this UI. So they can manually enroll themselves if that's their preference, and they can do that in their Chrome preferences. The other way that they can get enrolled is if they frequently block notifications. So if they're just never accepting notifications, that's something that Chrome will notice. It will automatically enable. It will use in-product help to let the user know that they've been automatically enrolled in Quiet UI. And then finally, sites themselves may have very low accept rates. So if your site is in the bottom few percentile of site accept rates, then Chrome will automatically use Quiet UI on that site. Now, I get this question of like, so what's the absolute number? And the answer is because it's percentile, that absolute number changes over time. So as sites improve the experience of asking for notification prompts, what being at the 5th percentile means is going to be different in a year from now than it is today. One thing we've done to make this easier for users of web notifications is we've included notification accept rates in the Chrome user experience report. And the Chrome user experience report is a public data set of some aggregated real user measures across sites. And you can see interesting information there about a variety of sites, including things like performance, site performance, and the notification accept and block rates, which can be useful for you in understanding both like where do you fall in the overall set, and kind of see where maybe other sites in your category are falling as well. So you can see if you can be doing a better job than some of your competitors. The one thing to keep in mind with the Chrome User Experience Report dataset is that to preserve privacy, we need to have a certain number of samples from a site before data shows up there. So if your site isn't there, it's probably because there wasn't enough samples in the threshold. And so you may need to look elsewhere for your site's data if it's not showing up in the Chrome User Experience Report. That was kind of a long ramble. I'm hoping I answered the question in there somewhere, but now I don't remember.
Well, to be honest with you, I think that we have an emerging pattern here. It's like PJ was very comprehensive in answering this question. Craig.
Yeah, I think when it comes to getting users to opt in, it's very similar to install, right? You want to appear when it's appropriate for the user, and use a value proposition. So, appearing appropriate to the user, having an opt-in available at, kind of all times while people are browsing the site is totally okay. Like a UI button, which is get notifications, could be in the header, could be in the tray. And then if you want to, put something a bit more obvious to a user, then triggering those when they've completed certain actions, could be a purchase, could be a sign up, anything that shows, there's a high chance that this user would want to receive notifications from you. So really, really similar to the way that you should handle install notifications. You apply the same type of logic. And then when sending the notifications, again, it's about being sort of timely and precise. So sending a notification when it makes sense for the user to receive one based on what you're telling them. So I think those are just, similar patterns. We have a chapter on this in the book as well. Andre will stick it in the chat. Just some kind of thought starters on how you can get started thinking about these kind of patterns to make sure push is really valuable. So implementing it in a way that's valuable for everybody.
I think key guidance on this, like if you just take away one thing from this, it would be don't prompt users for notification permission the moment they arrive on your site. Like you can improve your notification accept rate so much by doing that. And it might be very nice to look at your subscriber count and see that that's going up, but keep in mind that it's largely a junk list. Those are unqualified leads at that point. So most of those people are probably, if they accepted and this is the first time they've ever been on your site, there's a good chance that was by accident. Are they really going to engage or be of any value to you in the long term even if they accept it at that point, it's very unlikely. Most likely they're going to receive the first couple notifications and then they're going to go unsubscribe. And they will have had a worse experience on your site than they would have if you hadn't prompted them. So you focus on optimizing and qualifying who gets added to your notification subscriber list.
Yeah. Okay.
Jens, we got a whole bunch of live questions in the meantime. The Stella Bear again questioning the usefulness of the offline experience for e-commerce. Bit of a conceptual one there, doubting that it's useful to work with your card if you're offline. I would tend to disagree with that. I'd say it's still pretty great if you can keep your users' attention when they're offline and have them work on comments, on responding maybe to requests to leave reviews, or even just deciding what they want to keep or remove from the cart. What do you think?
To like kind of ground this in data, I worked with a large UK retailer where we were measuring exactly this. And one of the things we noticed was that time on site and conversion rates went up when they implemented offline and move back functionality through offline between the hours of like 6 a.m. and 9 a.m. and between 4 p.m. and 7 p.m. And if you think about what's happening during those hours, those are commuter times. People are getting on and off the tube and they don't have anything to do. So they're just, they're standing on the platform, they're standing in the train, and they're engaged with their devices and they're shopping. And they probably have some signal. They might have signals in the stations, but that the quality of those signals is probably very low. And there's probably moments when they have no signal at all. And by enabling those users to continue browsing, we're seeing substantially longer engagement times and then higher transaction volumes.
Well, fair enough. Okay, well, we are really running out of time now, and we still want to reserve some time for questions. So maybe we could talk a bit about the all-important topic of shipping PWAs and Android app, basically PWAs on Play and Galaxy Store. And can I just ask you one of the questions that we got from the community before we start covering those? So basically there was a question on whether there are any plans to do it the way Galaxy Store does it now in Google Play.
Yeah, there's no plans to do this directly because there are tools like pwabuilder.com that make this so trivial to do. If your goal is you don't want to do anything custom in your Android app, then I would suggest just using a tool like pwabuilder.com. So the reason why we're not optimizing this path is that it is fairly common for developers to want to make customization to their application. So for example, with trusted web activity, it is possible that a user on an older device or a device where they might have disabled the Chrome browser wants to use your app. So in that case, you're going to need to implement, say, a web view fallback. And to help developers out with that, we've created a utility called Bubble Wrap that you can find on GitHub. And that's an open source utility. And it helps you with fallbacks like that. But you probably still want to add customization to these fallbacks. And this is just fairly common for developers, we find. So what we're going to be focusing on is simplifying the development process through command line tools and collaborating with projects like pwabuilder.com and people who want to put a front end that makes this even easier to upload to the Play console. And I just find that almost every site has some need for these kinds of customizations. So it's better to just preserve the existing flow of you upload an APK to the Android store as opposed to pasting a URL in where you're going to be very limited in the amount of customization you can do, limited by the constraints of the web UI.
Well, this makes sense. Actually, Craig, we got a comment saying you have cute family photos in the background, but I don't think that's family photos. That's an elephant and a giraffe and.
Yeah, an elephant, a giraffe, a panda, and I think you have Tigger here. This is my son's room.
Very good. Since we're talking about family here, quick shout out to the communities where we are all really keen to continue the conversations with you. I've left the links in chat, and we'll make sure that those links are kept available for you later. There's a Slack community that you're all welcome to join to communicate in English. And there's a separate link for a Telegram community that is dedicated to Russian developers as well. So Russian-speaking developers, you're very welcome to both of those to continue the conversation there. And now on to the next topic.
Yeah, browser support for PWAs and Play.
Sure, yeah. So this is really about whether a browser is going to support trusted web activity. Trusted web activity is based on custom tabs. So if you're familiar with custom tabs, trusted web activity is just a form of a custom tab that does digital asset links verification and then runs in full screen mode. So there's a number of other browsers that support custom tabs today, including Samsung Internet, including Edge, including Firefox. So there's these browsers. I believe that Edge support for trusted web activity is landing very soon if it hasn't already. I'll need to double check on where that's at. There is trusted web activity in a Firefox nightly. I couldn't tell you. You need to reach out to their team to find out what the plans are for that becoming part of stable. And I believe that Samsung Internet plans to implement, but again, I couldn't tell you what the release milestone would be for that. In the meantime, we do continue to suggest that you use the bubble wrap library or implement your own custom WebView fallback for devices. The logic for how an app that uses a trusted web activity works is that it will search the device for a browser that supports trusted web activity. So first of all, it tries to respect the user's preference about what their preferred browser is. So if they've set a preferred browser that's not Chrome or the one that doesn't support a trusted web activity, then that's it's only if it doesn't support a trusted web activity that it will try another browser, and it may end up then launching in Chrome if the user has that on their device. But as other browsers add support for trusted web activity, then the app will prefer the browser that is the user's setting, set preferred browser on their device. So that's just something else to be aware of, is that there's fallback logic in the way that trusted web activity launches.
Good stuff. Right, I think we have time for just one more topic. Maybe if you could take just 2 minutes on that. I know it's huge, but we still want to hear your opinion on Web Vitals versus Android Vitals. Is this something, are Web Vitals something like Android Vitals? Are we pursuing the same goals there?
I think from a goal perspective, the goals are very similar. And the goal is really to reward sites that are putting in significant investments to build a better quality experience for their users, and to help developers understand what these quality signals are. And I guess coming back, similar to Lighthouse, you could have an amazing Web Vitals and a terrible overall experience. These are just heuristics. They're guidelines. It would be, we could say your site is not, making mistakes in these ways if you followed these vital, if you're doing a good job in these vitals, but we can't say that the overall experience is good. An empty HTML document is always going to be lightning fast, but that's not a very good experience. So just got to keep in mind, these things are there to be guidelines. They're not, the beginning and the end of the story. Something that I think is quite interesting in the context of trusted web activity is that there are ways that key web vitals could feed into Android vitals, and that's something that our team is looking into. So, for example, one of the Android vitals is something called an app not responding, usually referred to as ANR. And so, we could look at how long is the main thread being blocked in JavaScript, and say that after a certain number of seconds, this is equivalent to an ANR. So that's something that we're looking into, just to make sure that the ecosystems complement one another, and that developers are meeting the expectations of the users in the context of the ecosystem that they're using it in. So if a user's installed something from the Play Store, they might have a different set of expectations about how that's going to work and how they're going to interact with that than if they install it from the browser, or as if they're just using it in the browser. I think Web Vitals is a really exciting development, because it just does a much better job of manifesting key signals around performance that are super important for web developers to know about. And then because you kind of get this report in your console, it also just simplifies. It's been possible in the past for developers to get access to this kind of like RUM data, but it's usually a lot of instrumentation. It's a lot of work, and now you just you can just look at it. You don't have to do any extra work to have it.
Okay, right. I'm not gonna. Sorry, guys. I'm gonna have to cut this this discussion and proceed to Q&A. And we have gathered quite a few questions for our Q&A. So let's kick off with those. Oof, I don't even know which one to pick. There's so
we got a ton. Let's do one of the last ones that we got in chat. The payment subscriptions in PWAs. I think it's important probably to highlight here that it's not directly related to PWAs as such, right? As a subject. And so we have lots of interesting payment APIs on the web in general. We also have Google-specific subscription services that work great for certain websites, but none of it is directly related to PWAs that we've discussed so far. What do you think?
Yeah, I would say the same. Like, there's so many aspects of a great building a high quality user experience. Like how does the payment journey work? That is not directly related to, is it a PWA or not a PWA? This is just like kind of best UX practice, whether your website is a PWA or not.
Okay. Right, guys. Next question. Let's not take more than 2 minutes per question, maybe. We just need to be really brief and try to, well, maybe not finish on time, but kind of be on time. So I really like this one. It's one will install, sorry, that's translated from Russian. One will install PWA, start syncing with Google accounts to be restored after a device factory reset. And so it would be possible to install a PWA from a desktop to a smartphone, which is connected to the same Google account.
So the good news is, from my perspective, there's been like a long time pain point that PWAs were not restored the same way that other apps were when you get a new device, or if you did a clean wipe on the device and restore from backup. We're working on that. I hope that that will be something that ships by end of year. I'm going to do the hand wave APM thing and not commit to a specific milestone on that, but it is work that we have in progress. So that's something that we're planning. And I am hoping that it will arrive in probably the next 6 months type time frame. The second thing is that this is actually a really exciting idea. This idea of like syncing PWAs across devices for signed-in users. This is really sort of a discovery and user enablement superpower that isn't so easy to have with a native app. So I'm really excited about exploring this one. We don't have committed plans to do this yet, but it is something that our teams are considering. We're exploring how the user experience could work. We don't want it to be intrusive or unexpected for the user. So there's some considerations that we need to take into account there, but I think this would be super cool. So it's something that we're exploring.
All right, you heard it here first. We're exploring it. Watch this space.
Okay, Andre, do you want to pick your favorite?
I don't know which one is my favorite. I'll be just honest and go with them in chronological order. We did cover the first one was about Google Play publishing them as is. I think we covered that a little bit, right?
Yeah.
We covered bubble wrap and APK, so we got that covered. Battery consumption, that's an interesting one. Again, not maybe specifically PWA specific, but the question is around the comparison in terms of battery consumption between PWAs and native apps. I suppose the most pertinent one here is in an installed state.
Yeah, it's hard to give a definitive answer on like the battery usage of a web app versus a native app, because it just depends on like so much about both what you're doing and how you implement it. So like, if you're building a VR app and you're using WebXR to do that, and it's got the camera going, it's using device sensors, the screen is on, maybe at full brightness, like the energy consumption is, and you're using a lot of CPU, the energy consumption is obviously going to be quite high. I think what the question is the web necessarily going to be worse than a native app for energy consumption? And I think the answer there is no. We have examples of apps that have very comparable feature sets on the web and native, where the battery usage profile is not so different. But you just need to keep in mind all the best practices that need to happen here. Like, you need to think about how much JavaScript are you loading? How are you using it? Are you, like busy waiting for input? Are you doing smart things about, with the CPU and optimizing your code? And it really comes down to implementation details. The web is absolutely, an abstraction layer. And that comes with the benefits that it makes it easier to address, cross-platform devices. But it also comes with, every abstraction layer comes with cost. So you need to think about how you optimize for the added overhead that comes along with an abstraction layer.
Okay, well, that was very comprehensive. Oh, thanks, PJ. Right, there is actually, I think, a pretty interesting question on background geolocation. It basically says, can we have it on the web?
Oh yeah. So this is a great question. I think it's been a concept that's been explored for some time, and there's actually a couple of active issues that are being tracked in crbug.com. So if you want to, kind of go take a look at feature requests, active bugs in the Chromium code base, you can just go to crbug.com and you can take a look. This is all open, so you can see everything that's going on, really. And there's one particular bug in there for notification triggers, and we can post as a follow-up the exact link to it. And the notification triggers would allow you to kind of trigger a local notification based on a set of criteria. And initially, that criteria is just going to be time, but we could imagine adding a location trigger to activate the notification. And then once that notification event runs, you can capture that notification in the service worker and do something with it. I'm curious as to whether or not for this community, whether or not that would address what they're looking for from background geolocation, or if they instead, what they actually need is some ability to, constantly sample background location, in which case this might not be the right solution. And there are actually other bugs and feature requests in the database for the polling model as well. What I'd say is that we want to hear from you. So please do leave comments on these bugs in crbug.com. Tell us what your use cases are. Tell us what you need background location for, what not having it prevents you from doing. This is useful context for the development teams to understand what to implement and how important it is to implement it. Because, like every technology team, there's too much to do and too few people doing it. So we need to choose the things that we work on. So this kind of feedback helps us understand what we ought to be working on.
Yeah, and I've also included Twitter links for PJ, Andre, and Craig in the description. So if you want to ask them directly. Right, when will Chrome on Android support extensions?
Unfortunately, there's no immediate plans for this. The main reasons for this is just CPU and power usage. It's very difficult to model. What will the CPU impact be of enabling a given extension, let alone allowing kind of an unlimited number of extensions. There's users have a lot of expectations around how apps are using power on their device, and they would probably take a negative view of Chrome if they go look at the devices or the apps using power on their device. And they always see Chrome at the top of the list because there's some very CPU hungry extensions in there. So that's just something that for the time being is very difficult for us to address. So there's no immediate plans for adding extension support.
Mm-hmm. And another one. Well, thanks. Once again, very comprehensive. So when will WebShare API work on Windows without flags?
So this is one where right now I don't think it's prioritized. So please definitely go to crbug.com, find a bug for it. You can look for the WebShare component. If you don't see a bug for it already, then create a new one, and that'll let our team know about it. Those bugs are triaged at least on a weekly basis, if not more frequently. So someone will pick it up and evaluate it. So let us know that this is important to you.
Okay, how can I get a smooth animation for the launch splash screen?
So this is an interesting one because I'm not sure whether or not they're referring to the Web APK splash screen or the Trusted Web Activity splash screen. What I'd suggest actually is maybe you can reach out to us on Twitter and give us a little bit more details about your use case. There isn't a lot of customization available in the case of the Web APK. Like that splash screen is just like pretty much generated from what's in your manifest. And I've been curious for a while as to whether or not developers want something more customizable control over these splash screens. So if that's something you're interested in, like just ping me on Twitter. We'll have a conversation about it.
To be honest with you, I've actually been getting a lot of feedback from our partners that developers do indeed want that. So I'll ping you later on if you want to build a case for prioritizing that, because that's even for branding purposes, that just works a lot better. So that's
APIs and service workers, like that one.
Yeah. Go for it.
Right. There's a question about availability and just operation of various APIs, including geolocation, Bluetooth, Web USB, inside service workers for background operation, and including with the browser closed.
That's something where I need to reach out to the service worker team to see if they have any plans for these. I guess I'll fire from the hip with a guess on this and say that it may not be something that we're working on actively, because I would be concerned about like the power usage as well as privacy problems of allowing these things to be running in the background. It can be very complicated to explain, even through permission prompts to the user, what an application is doing in the background, and its privacy is something we want to be very sensitive to. So I guess the fully correct answer is I don't know if there are any plans for these APIs to become available in the background. I would be, let's leave it at that. We can check and get back to you on Twitter.
It's a quick live question that I think we can maybe cover pretty quickly. How does the use of PWA affect website metrics such as visits, analytics, etc.?
Depends on how good a job you do. If you are improving the load times of your site, if you're creating a better overall quality of experience, then you should see these metrics move in the right direction. PWAs should be a pattern where the user's getting a better overall experience. So you should expect improvements in these engagement metrics. Of course, if you build a terrible PWA, these metrics are going to go in the wrong direction. So it really just comes down to how did you implement?
And Craig, you must have seen examples where this has worked the right way for people.
Yeah, I mean, when people do it right, you see huge lifts. Often businesses that have done it correctly, they see kind of the same performance that they get from their flagship native apps. They start seeing similar on the web, right? But with the benefit of the increased reach. We have a really nice article on web.dev. I think it's the business value of progressive web apps, which is pretty recent, so you might not have seen it already, but it talks through quite a lot of the ways that you can measure the impact of the different like core components, be it like speed or offline or install. I think push as well. So it's some good guidance on how you can measure to make sure that what you're doing is bringing business value.
Yeah, and also, once again, the PWA ebook, both volumes, I think we're covering quite a lot there. Yeah,
we cover quite a lot in both volumes. There's 2 now. Will there be 3? Depends. Let's see.
Well, that does indeed depend on your feedback as well. I'm talking to our audience now. If you like it, make sure to find us on Twitter or something and say that you like it. That's important feedback. Right, Andre, do you want to pick any more questions? I think we have time for
I think
last ones.
I think you and I will try to make sure that we follow up with the lads to provide any answers to this as a follow-up, potentially, so as not to drag this stream eternally, although as much as we like it. Maybe a couple of closing remarks from our honorable guests. Thank you, first of all, for making the time today to be with us, and the developer community as well.
Thank you so much, and thanks to the developer community for all of your enthusiasm and for all the feedback that we get on new features and the ideas as well. The web is really such a community effort, and it's only by hearing questions like these, hearing from you on Twitter, seeing feature requests and bug reports in CRBug that we're able to know what the platform needs and build a better one for everyone. So yeah, please keep that coming. We love hearing from you, and I hope that I'll get a chance to engage with some of you online and even meet some of you in person. Once we're having in-person events again.
Great.
Yeah, thank you very much for everyone for joining. There's been loads of questions, which is really encouraging to see how much interest there is in building with the web. I think my closing remark is more than ever, which is a popular meme at the moment, but more than ever, it's important to have a good user experience for as many people as possible, and the web can really help do that. So keep on building great web experiences. Thank you very much.
I couldn't have picked a better parting message myself. Thank you, Craig. Thank you, Craig. Thank you, PJ. I think it's been well received for what it's worth. We had a lot of activity in the comments. We had a lot of questions in advance. If everybody likes it so much, please like, share, tell your friends about this session. We'll be happy to try and organize something like this or similar in the future as well. Daniil, anything you want to add?
Yeah, well, guys, I mean, I couldn't really thank you enough for joining this session. But can I just say, let me switch to Russian for a bit, because I want to make sure everybody gets this message. Спасибо всем, что подключились. Напоминаю про форму обратной связи. Ссылка в описании к видео. Мы отправим подарки 10 респондентам, выбранным случайным образом, кто заполнит форму. And back to English. That was just about the feedback form. So once again, thank you very much for joining this session, and you have been amazing. And Andrei, I mean, that was just an amazing job there in the comments. Seriously.
Comment Ninja, thank you so much.
Thank you all, guys. And just one last thing for everybody still listening to this for some reason. I have committed us to this, Daniil, sorry. We will do a quick recap of this in Russian the next time we do this, so that in case maybe you've missed some of the subtleties of the content in English, мы обязательно к вам вернемся, все еще раз объясним по-русски, ну и, конечно, будем с удовольствием продолжать отвечать на ваши вопросы. Thank you very much, guys. Спасибо.
Спасибо. Craig, I know you've been working your Russian.
Спасибо.
I should practice that in advance. I'll just say thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Yes.
Bye-bye.